This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for, care notes for caregivers. And, one of the things I have to say, Doug, is it's been a couple of weeks since we've talked, but I've been thinking about you and, all your staff, and I just want to say thank you for being there for everyone who's in need. So thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's been quite the run. One of the things that we've done, we were very, very forward thinking early on, before this was a crisis. And I started working with my staff on contingency plans. As I was following this disease coming out of China and starting to worry about it, and at first it was, kind of like, what is this thing? And then it was a little bit of concern, and, then it became a worry. And so, somewhere in those concern worry stages, started making plans like, what will we do if things started shutting down, or if, this thing got really bad. And fortunately we did, because we were, ahead of the curve, I believe, in getting things done. And we really had to reshape many of the things that we do, from how we do intakes to how, we are doing interviews for people, to where, how our staffing is working and getting paperwork done, and all sorts of things that we've had to jump into and do very differently than we did before. So if I swear that we probably have accomplished more major tasks within the last, say, 8 weeks or so than we have within the last maybe year and a half, as far as systems that had to change and other things. And then, obviously, the other thing is keeping in touch with the changes that were going on as we started to understand
Sure.
what the disease was. It's, when it first came out, I have to say that the Chinese were not forthcoming in information. And so, I started seeing reports early on where there was that one doctor who was an early reporter of what was going on. He was a Chinese doctor, and he was trying to warn that this thing was really significant. He eventually died. I don't know if you knew him.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, but he was, he's one of those folks that I think is, a hero of our time. And I hope we never forget what he tried to do in warning the world. But we had this situation occur where you had information that was not real forthcoming. And, then as we started getting more and more information and things started peeling back, realizing, the significance of what we're dealing with, one, both in the scope of it, but also in trying to figure out what this darn thing is and how to interact with it,
Sure.
and prevent it from spreading, and all those things, and all that had to be done on top of the systems and other things. So a lot of 18-hour days for the staff. And I can tell you, I've never been prouder of a group of people, I don't think, than I am of the staff, both caregivers and, more like the executive staff at our company. It's remarkable. So
I know that, you had a staff of people for, I guess I want to call it the routine care that you were giving before COVID. And you sort of had an idea in the back of your head, when you had to hire more people and what your status was. But with COVID, I'm sure you had to bring on more healthcare employees. And I'm wondering, did you have a problem finding people who really wanted to step up to the plate, thinking, I'm going to be working with an elderly population. I'm hearing the elderly population is more susceptible. Do I want to get it and bring it home to my family? Was this an issue at all?
It's interesting because in a way, it really drew out the best in people. Now, I'm not saying that there haven't been issues as far as trying to figure out pieces, but what I found was that our caregivers, as a rule, stepped up. They didn't shrink back. They were nervous, scared, like the rest of the population was, but they actually faced it. They talk about the police force or the firemen. Police will run into a spot where there's gunfire coming,
right,
where everyone else is fleeing, and firemen run into the fire when everyone else is trying to run out of the fire. And that's what I found is that because of caregivers and the nature and their hearts and who we hire, we had people who were running into the fire basically and wanting to get things done. And it's pretty impressive. Now, because of the shutdown, it complicated things like hiring. We did see a drop-off of the number of applicants, but I don't know if that was necessarily because people didn't want to help, because a lot of people did. I do think it was probably more related to that, things were shutting down and
right.
People weren't, they were kind of stopped in their tracks a little bit.
Well,
so.
I think we were stopped in our tracks, but I also think people started, as they started to hunker down, especially if they had children, they didn't have a way to help out, because with daycares being closed, schools closed, that probably showed some distance between those applying and those not applying. But when I think about when people say, you get to a certain age and you're more susceptible, I would think that those who are still living at home and have control over their own environment are probably much safer and healthier than those maybe living in, an assisted living or an independent living apartment where people are coming and going and maybe not noticing if they feel well or not.
Right, exactly. I do think that, one of the things, I guess, when talking about clients, one of the things we have seen through this has reinforced why I do and why I started the company. My belief was people do better in a home setting than they do in a facility.
Sure.
One of my beliefs around that is because you are probably less likely to be exposed to bacteria and viruses and other contagions when you are in a home setting, because a institutional setting, and I don't care what it is, tends to be the places where people can get things, and because you just have more opportunity, because you have lots of people concentrated with certain, oftentimes similar morbidities,
sure.
and so it's very easy for that to spread. So that's created an issue, and that if you look at where the people who are getting it, who are dying, you can look and you'll see that a lot of it is coming out of the institutional setting. One of the great tragedies in New York specifically was in New York, they ruled that people had to accept the people coming out of the hospital who are still infected with COVID into nursing homes.
Oh,
and so the nursing homes ended up getting all these, or however many, all these doesn't have to be that many, COVID patients
sure.
who are coming out. They were not fully cleared of the virus. They go into a nursing home setting because literally the state government forced that in the state of New York from, all the reports. And so you see this high concentration of deaths that happened in the facilities. That was kind of a mistake as far as, from the orders of, the government there to do that. That was, really a strategic, from a health standpoint, a strategic mistake to do that. But I think also, we're seeing that to a lesser degree here where we serve, where that a higher concentration of issues are happening in the nursing home, because you have the vulnerable population where the disease is likely not to be undetected, in the sense that, you have a lot of those patients with the silent symptoms. They're really not showing it. Well, this is a group that a lot of them are showing it, and not only showing it, but ending up, having really bad complications from this that eventually lead to someone's passing, and that's happening in the facilities. And whereas in a home setting, and especially with the way that things were shut down, those folks really were not getting the exposures, and so the rate of infection for the elderly in the home, or those that had infirmities, has been much, much lower, and that's been great. I mean, that's it reinforces why home is the best place, and people have gotten that. I mean, they're understanding that. So we're getting a lot of calls, people saying, I want to get my family member out of the facility and I want them home, where we're limiting the number of exposures that they have.
Absolutely.
So
now I'm sure, your healthcare providers have always washed their hands, used gloves and masks at certain times, depending on the person who they're caring for. So they know all these things, what to do and how to do it. But do you think now that, it's really being thrown in our faces, this is the absolute best way to stay healthy, that it's easier for them to do? Or do you think maybe they can get a little lax themselves?
Say that again. What do you mean that?
Well, I mean, they've always known, at when to wash their hands, to keep areas clean, to put on gloves when they're doing certain procedures, with their client. If they walk in and their client, has a cold, I'm sure they probably wear a mask so that they don't transmit back and forth. But now it's being really forced upon us, okay? Wash your hands, wear those gloves, wear the mask. And I've heard a couple of people who I know do not work for you. And if I ever found out that they did, I would think that something has happened there, because these people are saying, you know what? I don't have to wear a mask when I'm with my client. And I'm saying, but do you or don't you? It depends on what you're bringing from home as well, because we don't know the germs we're bringing. So is that...
for the most...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, so I'm wondering, is that really important, or once they're in the home, they can relax?
Yeah, so the answer is that you have to be very vigilant no matter what. masks are largely, especially the standard mask, not the respirators, but the masks,
Right.
are really largely meant to protect others from your germs rather than you from their germs. It protects you a little bit, but it really protects others more. It's meant to catch coughs and sneezes and other things that can disperse droplets out in the air. The problem with this particular disease is you can be contagious without having symptoms,
Right.
and that's the danger. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't get complicated, because some clients, let's say they have dementia, it may be hard for them to have someone who has a mask on. They may have difficulty understanding because they're hard of hearing. There are obstacles that we have to work with this. But masks, are protective. Ideally, the client would wear a mask and the caregiver would wear a mask. That way, both are protected. That's sort of the ideal situation, especially in close contact. Now, where we're at now and where we were at the beginning of this, at first they were not really encouraging masks, and then as people sort of started understanding, but part of that was they're trying to save the mask for more critical situations because of the shortages that were going on. But the other part was because, I think the understanding of transmission has evolved a little bit throughout this process. And so, what I can say is, especially in close-up contact, a mask is absolutely essential. And then further away, we know a sneeze can get dispersed for, long distances, and even talking loud, can cause something to go into the air, and it's an airborne droplet type of transmission. So, yeah, I know I've rambled a little bit there, but no, the PPE is vital.
Well, and the reason I ask it, when you talk to, and I think the majority of people agree, that the PPE is vital. And even those of us who, aren't working with the elderly, and when we go to the grocery store, we take a walk, we should be wearing that mask, because if you come in contact with somebody, you want to keep them safe from you, and you're hoping they'll keep you safe from them. And when I hear some care workers saying, no, it doesn't do anything, I'm so glad that you're telling me that it does, and this is what your workers are doing.
Yeah, I actually had kind of a back and forth a little bit with someone I know is a nurse on a social media, and basically she was criticizing masks, and essentially what she was saying was masks won't prevent that. What a mask will filter, a standard mask, not a respirator, is much wider than the microns of this virus, and that's true. The virus can pass through a mask if it's just in its kind of state that of just these little the as far as the size of it itself, but it gets dispersed in droplets. So it gets dispersed, through the moisture, and the moisture will get caught by the mask. And so I was kind of going back and forth saying, you're not looking at this correctly. This is really to prevent sneezes, coughs,
Right.
heavy breathing, and the moisture that it carries will get caught, and that's where it's residing. And it'll even slow down breath so that, let's say the virus does go through, theoretically, it's not going to then just be propelled into the air. It's more likely to kind of drop down, from that area more readily, to the ground, to other areas. So, because it's not being propelled.
Right. So, are you seeing that your clients now are requiring more time with caregivers because of, probably not seeing their families as much because of the stay-at-home rules, or are they working the same amount of hours?
No, you know what? We had kind of a twofold thing that happened. One is right immediately when things happened, there were a lot of people who went home. They were with their loved ones because they were sent home from work.
Sure.
So we had a short-term drop in hours. Some people who didn't need us right away because we were doing more household things, they kind of thought, okay, we can weather this. We don't necessarily need. So there were a lot of people that, that shortened. Then we had the flip side of that, which is others lengthened because of the things that you were kind of hinting at or mentioning, which is that people are not able to see their loved one, so they're getting less contact and they're needing more interaction in this case, or more assistance with various tasks. People who families were out of town, they couldn't visit every couple of weeks now, are really needing others to step in that place. So we have seen a big increase in our services as far as the number of hours. And again, it makes sense because we're supporting whatever they're needing support in. And you can argue that cleaning's not that important, but I would also say, as far as like life and death type of thing, but social interaction can.
Right.
Catching things before it becomes a big thing for someone is huge. And so I think if you look even in facilities, in the past, people would be able to visit their loved ones
Right.
who are rehabbing in facilities. Well, they've put a stop to visitors, family visitors, from coming in. Well, that has really significant consequences because you place an older person after surgery into a rehab facility, and then you isolate them because they're not allowing them to go into the halls or other things for the most part. They're having to stay in their room. They're isolated in their room. They're recovering. It's already confusing to be out of your normal tasks, routines, and other things. Now you throw in isolation on top of that. And I have literally seen where families have sat in like lawn chairs outside their loved
Yes.
one's room, looking through and talking to their loved one on a phone. And just to be able to have some sort of contact where that family member is one being checked up on, and also where they're able to have what at least feels like social contact. We've been able to step in many of those situations and have our aides. They will allow aides to come into a facility, so we've been able to have aides come in and be the surrogate family, and it's worked out really, really well for a number of families that were basically kept from being able to be with their loved ones.
Well, I have to say that your home care workers, big kudos to them because, they are the surrogate family. And I cannot imagine being in a facility or even being home alone okay, and not having contact with people. It's been hard enough for myself, still recovering from my surgery, and I still can't drive, that I'm totally dependent, on my husband to just take me around the block. But at least I have social contact. And without that, I just don't know if people can recover 100%. It's got to be very, very difficult. But what I've heard about the care workers, it's just like everyone is their family, and they're there, they're holding your hand, they're supporting you. And, kudos, because that's not in my bloodline. And, but I surely would need it in the future.
Yeah, well, what I could say is this: is that that the everyone has been hearing, and there's been lots of shout outs to people that are the frontline workers, and people in hospitals, people in the nursing homes, the aides that are there, and that is really, really true. I would say the unsung heroes in all of this, in keeping people safe, have been the home care workers. They're a little bit less visible, but the impact that they've had is beyond belief. It is. I could tell you story after story after story where our folks have been the difference maker in people's lives, and I think that they really are keeping people safe in this setting, and because again, as I mentioned, home is a safer option in general. So whether so the first option for people, if they are home, the home care workers are, you're not going to have a ton of different exposures generally. So we know that this is all kind of risks, and the number of exposure or the possibilities of exposure increase people's risk. And so, if you're betting on someone, with all things, you'd probably be putting the bet on the person at home that's getting help versus a person in a facility, only because of that statistical thing. And so these care workers who have stuck their neck out, done the things, been willing to go out there, learn new things, reinforce the right behaviors as far as sanitation and doing other things, have literally, I believe, saved thousands upon thousands of lives around the country, and I believe our folks locally have been those lifesavers in folks' lives, and so they really are the unsung heroes. And they're also those unsung heroes because our caregivers are coming in and going into the facilities as well, and being the surrogate family and doing the same thing, keeping them safe by lowering the amount of exposure, but also doing that psychosocial interaction that is so important for people so that they don't fall to pieces in the situations that we've found ourselves into.
Right.
And,
Well, how can people find you? I mean, now that, we're supposedly being able to break out a little bit more, we still know that there is a vulnerable population out there. And it's not just seniors, but anyone who has any kind of, medical issue, that this virus can flare up. So if somebody wanted to contact you for services, how would they do that?
Well, the first and best way is to call our phone number, and I'll give you that. It's 440-484-5390. I'll say that again. It's 440-484-5390. Our regular hours are 9 to 5, but you can get a hold of us even after hours by listening to the prompts if you really need to talk to a live person after hours, it's possible to do that with one of our employees. So that's one way. The other thing is you can go to our website, cherishedagency.com. That's CHERISHEDAGENCY. So cherishedagency.com. And there's all sorts of information and free stuff that people can get on our site on top of that. So it's a great resource as well for folks. And one of the other things to just know is I encourage people to be proactive in a couple ways. One, be proactive by, if you think you're needing help, give us a call, and we'll really try to work with you to figure out how we can maximize the benefit that we could potentially give to a loved one or the person themselves. But also be vigilant, because the most vulnerable population is the population we serve. And so where I think it's good and okay for people to start to safely go out into the community again. The need for isolation for this population remains constant. That we shouldn't let our guard down with this. So some of the things that have been important up to this point in time, as far as what the role we play, is going to remain that after this, if we're doing things right, because we really do need to protect this group from exposure. And the best way to do that is to limit contact, as best as we can, and yet not denying them, social interactions and the other things that are really vitally important.
Absolutely. Now, since we have listeners all across the United States, if somebody were to listen to this and say, well, Cherished Agency is in the Cleveland area, that doesn't really help me, can they contact you to find out who might be available in their area, or is there a way that they should Google that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things that I would recommend. Number one, I would recommend going on to the Home Care Association of America, their website, and they have a list of members on that. It's an association with standards, and so that's one way to be able to do it, is say who's available in my area that's part of the Home Care Association of America. I would also look closely at reviews online, and then ask other people, have you had a good experience? So you can look at reviews for the various agencies, that's good. And then just ask people, have you used a home care agency? And a lot of times people will say, yeah, we had a great experience with so-and-so or this group. And then, one thing is on our site, we have a free download that people can use if they want to. Excuse me, and it's questions you can ask, when you're interviewing a home care company. So you can go on and download that, and wherever you are in the country. We service the Cleveland area and the suburbs around Cleveland. If you're outside of kind of that area, what I suggested would be good as far as doing that. So call us if you're in Cleveland, but outside of that, do the steps that I have, and I think it'll take you a long way in getting the help that you might need.
Well, I think that's terrific because, again, sometimes we get in these situations, we think we're prepared and we're not, and then all of a sudden, we need the services. And so for those of you listening, in the description of this show, I'm going to put these 3 tips in there, including contacting the Home Care Association of America, because, hey, we're all in this together.
Yeah, it's on the site of the Home Care Association of America. They actually have a listing, so you can put in your information and then find out, some of the people in the area that are part of the association. And again, if someone's conscientious enough to be a part of the Home Care Association of America, they've already taken one of the steps that are really important, for it. Another thing that you can look at is Home Care Pulse. Home Care Pulse does surveys, and I think they have listings as well of various agencies. And again, if an agency is conscientious enough to do surveys of their people, whether it be employees or the potential clients, or clients, I guess, not potential in this case, it makes a big difference. And so they also have some listings of companies as well. So that's a little bit different angle that you can look at. So,
well, if you're in the Cleveland area, obviously we want you to look at Cherish Agency. We've been working with them for going on 3 years, and I haven't heard one bad thing about you guys. So that is terrific. And you win awards all the time too. So somebody's doing something right there, and I think it starts from the top down, and you're all equal. So we thank you very much for caring for our loved ones.
Sure, and one last just thought. It's not really a tip of the day or anything like that. It's more of a bit of a warning, and that is we're likely to see a resurgence in the fall. We're going to have bumps along the way. This is not a short-term thing. So just know, make your preparations now. It's kind of the grasshopper and the ant. Be thinking through things. It's easy to get lulled into, hey, everything is fine now. Well, there are we're really not through this thing until hopefully they get a vaccine that is having the impact of limiting people's ability to get this, or at least minimizing the reaction. And I pray that we have that sooner than most, but we are probably going to see some sort of a bump coming in the fall season is in all likelihood.
Right.
So anyway, be careful out there, I guess, is the other thing.
Well, be careful, be safe. And again, if you have any questions about what you've just heard, all the information will be in the description area of this podcast. And we want to wish you all well, and we will be talking to you soon. Have a great day.
Take care.